Hello and welcome to the GameDay Podcast from talkSPORT.
This is a disgrace from Manchester United. This is totally unacceptable. This manager and this group of players have done so much good this season, but it's all being undone. The way they've capitulated in this second half, this is a real backward step.
There's a lot more to come as well. Plus, Arsenal still top of the table. Chelsea actually finally score a goal, and Everton and Forest kick lumps out of one another. We'll review all the games from the weekend's Premier League action. It is the GameDay Podcast from talkSPORT.
Anfield rises for a standing ovation. Liverpool 7, Manchester United 0.
There are many things what makes me angry, but concede so easily goals, definitely one of them.
Freak result, top performance, really top performance from the start. I thought the way we started the game was really special, was best for a long time.
Honestly, it's one of those things where you have to do where the last 7 days started and where it finished. Can do a little Carabao Cup. Oh, they've won silverware. They've been doing it on breakfast all morning, just doing me saying they won the Carling Cup, and then they go 7 now. Alex Crook, who had a really bad time last night, Kevin. I don't know if you realised this, but Alex was in a studio locked in talkSPORT Towers as the goals were raining down on the Manchester United goal with a Liverpool fan, Adebayo Akinfenwa. At one point, Crook, who didn't send me many messages, bearing in mind we've been friends for like 25 years and WhatsApp has only been out for 20 of those, we probably average about 40 messages between us a day. Maybe more, I don't know. Yesterday, he responded to me twice, right? That was it, because he couldn't bring himself to speak to me. One of those was to suggest that he wanted to get physically violent with the person opposite him in the studio who's winding him up, something chronic. That person was Adebayo Akinfenwa. So, funnily enough, he decided against it.
Yeah, good luck with that. And that had a paid thing. That's a pay-per-view I would shell out for, I think.
Oh, dear. Move over, Jake Paul. We've got a new contender for box office madness in town. Crook, so how are you feeling 24 hours on after the debacle?
Bloody dreadful, to be honest. I've woken up like it's a bad dream. I can't quite believe what happened when you look at, where Manchester United have been and the journey that they've been on. It was a step back in time, and as I said on air on Sunday night, those players need to hang their head in shame. There's ways to lose, and listen, I knew it was a difficult fixture. I said it on the pod on Thursday. I wasn't completely convinced because it's Anfield, Liverpool's cup final. To lose 7-0, to concede 6 in the second half, my word, it was terrible.
Tactically, I thought it was a really odd decision. We've praised him to the hilt for the way that Erik Ten Hag has lined up tactically, but I thought it was a really odd decision to play Bruno Fernandez one side and Antony the other, because those are two players out of all of the players in the Manchester United squad, Kevin, that are not going to track back and give you protection. And if you know anything about Liverpool, you know they're pretty good down the flanks.
100%, and they cause problems all day. I mean, even though I would accept Liverpool were second best at times in that first half, no doubt about that. Obviously, that's where the goal comes from. And Fred, I think, is conscious of the coverage on that side, so gets dragged out of position. That's where that first goal comes from. And that was the key to the game because it gave Liverpool that momentum. It gave them the opportunity to build on it. And yeah, we've rightly praised Ten Hag, most of the season. He's got most things right, but it was a very strange setup. That said, you cannot then legislate for the sheer panic. You can't legislate for the lack of effort without the ball. Ten Hag football, any football at elite level does not work if you're not prepared to track back, if you're not prepared to keep your discipline. It was really quite extraordinary, that second half. The level of almost disrespect to the Manchester United badge in a way. I know that's kind of a bit of a cliche and seems a bit over the top, but I was quite stunned by it actually from some of the players. And Bruno Fernandez in particular is a player that is wonderfully gifted as a footballer, as a a guy with the ball at his feet, I think he's wonderful. I think he has a body of work that shows how successful he can be. What he also has a body of evidence with is that when things go against him, he's a nightmare. He's a liability because he won't track back all the time. He whines. He sets a bad example to his teammates. And I thought he, unfortunately, was the kind of poster boy for this collapse.
Should we talk a little bit about overreaction? Because we can overreact to certain things. And sometimes I think that when a team go on a long unbeaten run or have put together a series of great results and have only lost a handful of games over the course of a long period and then get thumped and it all comes to a crashing to an end, we get a bit sort of like over the top in the way we react to it. But are you more justified as a Manchester United fan getting really irate, really upset because it's Liverpool, because it was 7, because of the manner of it, and because ultimately, if you are going to lose any game, this is the one you don't. And nobody seemed to react after they conceded that first goal. To me, as soon as the second goal went in, the game was over. Manchester United were never going to come back, which was startling because in the first half, they were the better side, had 3 brilliant chances and should have already been 2-0, at least 2-0 up.
And that's the worry. It wasn't a bad day at the office. It was a bad half of the office. It was effectively what happened in the second half that caused so much damage and so much concern. I don't think it is an overreaction. First time since 1931. They've lost 7-0. Obviously, they've done it in the backyard of their arch rivals, which just adds insult to injury. Liverpool were very good, and even Jurgen Klopp afterwards said, well, that was a performance in keeping with previous seasons, not with what we've done this season. So we need to give them a little bit of credit. But I think it's a reality check for Manchester United. It's a reality check for me. Not that I ever put them in the title race, despite you trying to get me to, but it shows there's still some way away from that. And it probably shows, actually, that when you look at the squad, you look at the fact that Wout Weghorst is still leading the line and may never score a goal again.
Don't start moaning now. Don't start moaning now.
There's still a long way to go.
Because you'd won the League Cup. So don't start moaning 7 days on.
There's still a long way to go until Manchester United can be considered a force. And it's about how they react here. They've got Betis on Thursday, and then they've got Southampton at home next weekend. Now we're going to see what this team are really made of in terms of
You're not going
character.
to lose to Betis. They've got a player who's 42 years of age in their team, surely.
Well, listen, stranger things have happened. Listen, I do think they looked dead on their feet as well. I think that was a factor. I think they've been running this treadmill, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. Emotionally draining experience against Barcelona. Winning a cup final is always emotionally draining. Then they had to come from behind against West Ham in midweek. I do think it caught up with them. That's no excuse to concede 7.
The best day yesterday, mainly because I did things that I'd never done before, right? I downloaded a meme maker just to taunt and tease Crook. I've got this wonderful picture of him sitting on his phone in another variety of roll neck, which I just kept changing the words at the top of the bottom throughout the course of the day. It was absolutely, I had so much fun just taunting him. And actually, I was a little bit disappointed for Manchester United. I didn't want Manchester United to get battered as much as they did because I think they've had such a great season. It's been a great little arc of a story. But maybe this sort of helps the narrative as well, doesn't it? Because it sort of corrects it slightly. But it's one of those days. I was listening to Laura Woods on Breakfast on Monday morning, and some Tottenham fan tried to ring her up and give her a little bit of banter about the fact that they'd also beaten Bournemouth in the last minute. Can't believe she was wildly celebrating. She crushed him within an inch of his life, with several references to, one, how bad Tottenham had been, and the fact that when he started having a go at her about their top scorer, she said, "You bought Richarlison, and he hasn't even scored a goal for you yet." And this guy was just completely flawed. It was terrific. But that's what we love about football. It's the banter that goes along with it. And the fact that Crook is having the worst day of his life is music to both Kevin and I's ears. Kevin, you big Liverpool fan, I thought yesterday that maybe we've started to see the return of a triumvirate up front for Liverpool. Are we seeing the new Mane, Salah and Firmino combination come to fruition with the 2 new signings?
Yeah, I think we could be. And I think it is significant that Gakpo and Nunez played such an important role. I think Nunez has been playing well for a while, actually. And I think Cody Gakpo, what we've seen with him is his composure. I think if you look at the 2 finishes, they're outstanding, and he very rarely gives the ball away. He's very neat and tidy. So it's a very different front three to the one before in some ways. But I've said this all season. It was about patience. You have to take your medicine sometimes, especially with the quality of the teams at the top of the Premier League. Arsenal have had to do it. Manchester United have had to do it. Chelsea are having to do it now. Sometimes you have to take a step back to then take steps forward. And that's what Liverpool are doing right now. They're trying to rebuild a team while staying competitive. This was a particularly sweet win, I think, for people of my generation that kind of missed some of the really good stuff at the start. And we got the Cantona FA Cup final. We got things like Solskjaer and York scoring late on in that cup game when Liverpool had led at Old Trafford for ages. It was very, very sweet, I think, for Liverpool. And I think it is a big step forward. But now you have to back it up. You can't then go to Bournemouth and lose.
Come on,
we can't be
Bournemouth.
talking in a week's time and say, well, we can't be talking in a week's time and saying, oh, Liverpool pulled out of position. Why did they defend like that? That was a terrible performance. You can't. You have to back it up with another win.
Yeah, but nobody else is going to give him the room to be able to manoeuvre down the flanks like Manchester United did. I thought Antony's performance was really poor, absolutely poor. The way he was not watching what was going on behind him at all, and then he would dart into position going forward, but as soon as he lost the ball, wouldn't get back and track back in any way, shape or form. He would amble, lethargically walk back to the halfway line after losing the ball, and I thought that was really pretty poor. And you mentioned Bruno Fernandez and how sort of moany and whingy he can be, and he's like that all the time, by the way, in defeat and in victory, whether they're drawing again, whatever. He's always whinging and in the referee's ear and in the opponent's ear and trying to wind everybody up, because that's how he sees it. His role is to try and get his team over the line. You know, this is a guy who's only missed 3 games all season, for God's sakes. He certainly puts a shift in. But yesterday, I thought, when you're losing 6-7-0 and start blaming everybody else for it, there is a part where you have to start taking a little bit of responsibility as the captain and the leader for yourself. As Kev said, Crook, sometimes you have to take a step back. And what you don't want to do is step backwards and then fall off the back of a cliff, obviously. But just sometimes you just have to readjust your gait. It's okay.
Listen, I agree with him on Bruno Fernandez. I don't think Ten Hag will take the armband off him. He's already taken it away from Maguire. I don't see a scenario where we have a third captain.
That after one game, are they? I mean, that's just ridiculous. Who would suggest that?
Well, no, but it's been coming with Bruno Fernandes. He isn't the leader in that team, really. You look at likes of Casemiro, Varane, even Luke Shaw, I think have shown more leadership qualities at times this season than Bruno Fernandes. But if we're talking about tactical decisions, and I was reluctant on Sunday night to really pin too much blame on Ten Hag. I don't see it's his fault that the players capitulated, as you've already said. In the first half, United were more than in the game. But moving Rashford, I know he's done it a few times this season, but moving him from his best position, in my opinion, wide on the left, where he could have really tested Alexander-Arnold defensively, seemed odd. And then you've got the Dalot-Wan-Bissaka conundrum. I actually understood it before the game, because I think he wanted Dalot to play on the front foot and try and stop Robertson influencing the game in Manchester United's final third. But actually, maybe you need to go to Anfield and show a little bit more respect to your opponent and play your best defender. I still think they need a new right-back in the summer, by the way. They certainly need a new central midfielder to come in and play alongside Casemiro, and they need a number 9. Ali McCoy's on breakfast this morning saying that Harry Kane will come on to Spurs, but their defeat this weekend will make him realise that he should be joining the team we've lost 7-0. I'm not sure I totally get his logic on the back of this weekend, but obviously he'd be a good addition.
Casemiro, I thought, was suffering with a little bit of an ailment during that game. He stuttered in the first half and didn't look as mobile as he usually is. Liverpool enjoying their longest unbeaten run in the fixture between United and them at Anfield since a spell between 1970 and 1979. The last time that Liverpool scored 7 against Manchester United, I think, was 1908, when they beat them 7-4 at Anfield. It is the biggest defeat. In fact, the last time that United conceded 7 in a game, we have to go back to the eve of the last World War, February 1939, when United were beaten 7-1 by Charlton at the Valley. So it doesn't happen very often. So it is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, or seemingly. So there you go. You've had your thrashing. Now you just take your medicine, Crook. For God's sakes. Mo Salah broke a couple of records yesterday as well. He took over Robbie Fowler as Liverpool's all-time top Premier League scorer. Congratulations to him. Crook, would you like to pay tribute to an amazing talent?
Not really, no.
I would. Look, what I love about him is he's got a very healthy level of ego, and I think all the best strikers do. And I think the fact that he said from the moment he got to Anfield, he had his eye on that record, you could see how much it meant to him. And I think that's great. I think he is a team player. I know people think he's selfish. I think that's right. I think good strikers have to be. You have to get that balance. He set up goals as well. But he's so determined and he is so dedicated. And you can tell why Liverpool fans have loved him for years. And I think it was another absolutely tremendous performance in a big game. He is so important to them.
And last appearance for Roberto Firmino in this fixture as well. He's been a stalwart for Liverpool over the last 6 or 7 years. Quick, would you just like to pay tribute to him?
No.
I would. Absolutely joyous player, right? Like, football's supposed to be about fun. He is the embodiment of fun. Like, amazing skill, plays with a smile that's artificially, lit up, but that's fine. And I just think he's tremendous. And the roar when he scored was obviously the loudest one of the lot.
Crook was double shifting yesterday, so he did the boot room in talkSPORT Towers, but prior to that, Forest 2, Everton 2, where basically both teams decided to kick lumps out of each other for 90 minutes and see who could end the game with the least amount of players hobbling. Everton's twice pegged back from winning positions, but I thought actually Nottingham Forest could have gone on and won the game towards the end of the match, Crook.
Yeah, agreed. It felt like momentum was with them after a terrific second goal from Brennan Johnson. But yeah, the card count, I think what was it, 5 bookings for Everton, 3 or 4 for Forest as well. I've got to say, John Brooks lost control of the game pretty quickly, and I think he played a part in the fact it turned into a kicking fest in the second half. Decent point for Everton, despite the fact they were 2 up. Their away record is lamentable, 9 games away from Goodison now without victory. It maintains Forest's unbeaten home run as well, but it keeps them both firmly in the mix, doesn't it? Brennan Johnson's a terrific player.
2 lowest scoring sides in the league, and then they managed to come up with a 4-goal thriller. It's quite odd, really. Were Everton unfortunate not to get a second penalty for a foul on Coleman, Kev?
Yeah, it looked that way to me. It was an awkward one, that kind of tangle. There was a suggestion that maybe he'd kicked Colback, but I think if they'd given the penalty, I could have understood it. But I don't think it was as stonewall as Sean Dyche was suggesting.
No.
Crookie mentions Brennan Johnson. He's one of my favourite players in the whole league. I think he's tremendous. I think
one of Ben Godfrey's favourite players as well, because he couldn't stop touching him.
I think, and understandably so, because you've got to try and contain him somehow. The pace is blinding. His finishing at times is great. I know it still needs a bit of work, but he can score all types of goals. I think he's going to be, in 2-3 years' time, a tremendous footballer.
Remarkable, isn't it, that they managed to sign 40 players, yet the best player that they've got is one they already had, and has come through the youth ranks.
Yeah, and look, you have to applaud the consistency now. What is it, 9 unbeaten at home? I mean, that's a tremendous record for a team coming into the league that you weren't sure how they were going to do. That is genuine momentum. And if they can keep that going, even if the away performances are still wretched, then they'll be fine.
Yeah, they hopefully are going to inch over the line. I say hopefully because I backed them back in September to stay in the league. And I must admit, I didn't think they'd do as well as they did in that intervening period. And now I'm looking at the table and I'm thinking it's still very tight. So keep inching towards that 40-point mark, lads. Keep getting there. Everton have got to try and get there as well. But they've got Brentford, Chelsea, Spurs and Manchester United next. And on paper, that looks to be incredibly, incredibly tough for a team that, let's be honest, that they concede far too many goals. And I was surprised they scored 2 yesterday, I've got to be honest with you. They're really in it.
Yeah, I thought defensively they weren't too bad yesterday. Actually, I thought Michael Keane and Tarkowski at the heart of the defence did okay. Godfrey struggled, as you mentioned, up against Brennan Johnson. But I think Sean Dyche will see encouragement from the way that they limited Forest to not that many clear-cut opportunities. The problem is in attack, isn't it? Damari Gray leading the line. He's their top scorer with 6 goals now, but he's not really that focal point up front. They need Dominic Calvert-Lewin fit, but we've been saying that for some time. So I think they're right in it, Everton. I still think that they might go down, which I think would be a huge story.
It's different to limiting Nottingham Forest chances to limiting Brentford, Chelsea, Spurs and Manchester United to chances, though, isn't it? Let's turn our attention to Saturday's action now, and in particular, the league leaders' drama involving Arsenal once again.
Bernardo Silva! Pokes it in from 18 yards, first time!
It has finished. Manchester City 2, Newcastle 0.
Over to you, Arsenal.
Nelson brings it down, shoots goal!
Oh my goodness! Luis Nelson! Welcome to Arsenal! Title challenge back on!
It was an extraordinary day, a beautiful experience at the end. Very dramatic, but worth living it because it was a great end to it.
Still we are there, and this is the best title I can feel for my players, for all of us, staff, backroom staff, that still we wanna do it.
Arsenal certainly have managed to move on from 2 goals conceded early on against Bournemouth and managed to wait until the very last minute to get themselves all 3 points against Bournemouth with another late victory. This time it was Reiss Nelson coming to their rescue. I mean, Reiss Nelson's hardly played all season, and then he turns up and scores a terrific goal. Who would have expected someone to get sunk by Nelson in the last minute of a battle? That's never happened before. What did you think of the game as a whole, Kevin? And what does this do for Arsenal's title ambitions? This sort of shows the resilience they've got, doesn't it?
I think it does a huge amount. I was very critical of Arsenal under Arteta for a long time because I wondered about their fragility. I wondered about whether he'd be able to move the needle in terms of making them a bit tougher in difficult situations, and he's absolutely done that. And this is a great example of that because not only do they have the quality to open teams up, but they have the determination as well. And for somebody like Reiss Nelson, who I watched many times in the Bundesliga with Hoffenheim, clearly a talented guy, but maybe didn't have the maturity and the consistency you needed at that level at that time. But he's clearly gone away and worked on his game. And for him to deliver a finish of that quality amid the maelstrom with all the chaos going on around him, with the game on the line, is really quite extraordinary. And moments like that do win titles. They galvanise teams because they will believe in any game where they're in trouble, they can haul themselves out of it. I thought Bournemouth were very unfortunate. I thought they played well. I thought the design of the play for the goal a few seconds in was very, very impressive. I know you need a lot of things to go your way, but it was still highly impressive. And I thought they looked good. But when you're up against that quality, wave after wave, eventually teams crack, and that's exactly what happened. So a huge win for Arsenal, massive.
Adrian Dayon caught quite a little bit of heat off the Arsenal fans, claiming that they've been lucky. Any element of luck about this one? Was it, or was it actually because they've got that winning mentality that has been injected into their soul by Arteta?
Well, Reiss Nelson will probably never do that again with his wrong foot, with his standing leg, and it's an incredible finish, as Kev says.
Are you trying to get some heat from the Arsenal fans as well? I mean, you're just trying to shift the sort of narrative away from Manchester United's diabolical collapse and onto yourself here.
No, listen, it's a fact, but I do think Arsenal have a winning mentality. I do think it's potentially season-defining, but I'll come at it from the Bournemouth perspective. I was devastated for Gary O'Neill, gutted for Gary O'Neill, watching in the press room at Southampton, 2-0 up. As soon as Arsenal got the first goal, you feared the worst. But it's the third time this season that Bournemouth had led by 2 goals. They did it at Leeds and lost. They did it at home to Spurs and lost. Now they've done it at Arsenal. But again, I don't think they've lost much in defeat. There's no disgrace in going to Arsenal and pushing them as close probably as anybody has at the Emirates this season, barring Manchester City. And then you look at the league table, Bournemouth find themselves bottom. You might shoot me down here. I don't think Bournemouth have been the worst team in the Premier League this season. I think the small margins, they've struggled for a striker. Dominic Solanke hasn't been able to score the goals in the Premier League that he did in the Championship. I still think they'll stay up, Bournemouth, and that might be me with my South Coast spectacles on. I still think they've got enough fight and enough character. Another difficult game next weekend. You'll be there, Sam, against Liverpool. Get that one out the way, and then there are some winnable fixtures. I think they've got a chance.
In terms of Arsenal, though, Mikel Arteta has developed this reputation of being quite animated on the touchline and over-celebrating and going a bit wild when things go right. Can you understand that sort of need to really galvanise his team and his troops. I think his behaviour actually has helped the Arsenal atmosphere. The way he is sort of bought into the joy of scoring a late goal or scoring any sort of goal or contesting a decision. He's fighting for the team. He's demonstrably showing that emotion. Completely different to other managers at certain times. We can all make comparisons and different people with different characters. But ultimately, Arsenal had a problem with their supporters before he came along. He has embraced the need for them to have a figure to sort of look up to and to sort of attach themselves to. His antics on the touchline might not be everybody's cup of tea. I know that Adrian's not happy about that, what happened at full time when he didn't shake Gary O'Neill's hand initially, or I don't know what happened there towards the end of it, but he was so busy celebrating that he didn't pay any attention to the Bournemouth bench. But ultimately, sometimes football is about celebration and it is about getting together, and there's a real sort of family feel about, about a pack mentality about that Arsenal support now, isn't there?
100%. I think it's very, very important what he's been able to do. Arsenal, I think, is becoming more of an intimidating place to go. Certainly it's a louder place to go. And, they might not get to the levels that we saw on Sunday at Anfield, but it does make a difference. And winning obviously helps that too. I have no problem with Arteta celebrating, running around, doing all that stuff. Honestly, resist the fun police at all opportunities, because the number of times you'll get people moaning about, oh, he celebrated a goal. Arsenal have celebrated a win as if they've won the league. Arsenal have No. Football's supposed to be about joy. It's supposed to be about celebration. It's supposed to be about those moments. So all the people who moan about that, I can't understand it. I genuinely, what we here for? Or a polite handshake and a nod? No. That if you can't celebrate a 97th minute winner when you're pushing for a title, what can you celebrate?
I thought it was a bit sad, actually, that Aaron Ramsdale felt the need to take to Twitter to almost apologise for his celebrations because, of course, it was against his old club and left Bournemouth bang in trouble. But I don't think any Bournemouth fan begrudged him because it was such an intense occasion. Arsenal going for the title. We know he's a passionate guy. I think he was entitled to embrace his teammates and not worry, really, about the fact he was against his old club.
Be interesting what your reaction would have been had he not been one of your golfing buddies.
I'm just backing up the point that Kev made. There's too many people who are willing to pour scorn on over-celebrating. There's many more down days.
So why can't you just enjoy the fact that Liverpool scored 7 goals at the weekend rather than berating Manchester United for conceding them?
Honestly, I'm going to leave in a minute. I'm going to take my ball and go home.
A win for Bournemouth would have seen them move out of the bottom 3. But next weekend, massive game for them again, Crook.
Yeah, huge. And it was funny. Before Liverpool scored 7 against Manchester United, I was thinking Bournemouth would have a chance based on what I saw at Crystal Palace.
What was it? What was the score?
I missed that. Sorry, how many did they score?
Goals?
When I watched Liverpool at Crystal Palace, I wasn't impressed. And I thought if they turn up at the Vitality and play like that, Bournemouth have a chance. Now I'm less certain. But I still think they do have, as I say, a chance of staying up because they do have some winnable games to come. And I think what you can't question, and there's a lot of Bournemouth fans who are anti-Gary O'Neill, I don't get that. As Scott Minto has said, on paper, this is the worst squad of the league. I think he's overachieved, to get them to a situation where at one stage they were out the bottom 3 at the weekend. The players are playing for him. There's a better spirit in that group than there is in a lot of the other teams who are fighting to stay up. And I think that's going to play a part.
Manchester City 2, Newcastle. I was at this game on Saturday, and actually, for large parts, Newcastle played really well in it. They had 3 unbelievable chances in this match and didn't take them. And when I spoke to Eddie Howe afterwards, it was a similar conversation that we'd had a week ago when they lost the Carabao Cup final. They'd had a couple of good chances in that match, but not taken them. And the fact is, they're just not ruthless enough in both the boxes, Kevin, and that's what's cost them.
Yeah, that's it. And I think they made a number of good opportunities, played some really good stuff against City, just as they had in the reverse fixture. But while they got the goals in the reverse fixture, they didn't here. And they don't have that ruthlessness. They don't necessarily have that selfishness. Callum Wilson I have a lot of time for, but obviously the injury record is a big problem. And he isn't that elite bracket of Premier League striker.
He's also not in great form. He's having a bad time. 1 goal in 13 appearances. And actually, I wanted to bring this up with you both because I wondered when we talk about ruthlessness in both boxes, whether Eddie Howe's being ruthless enough with his strikers, bearing in mind that record that Callum Wilson has produced. And he's got a guy in Alexander Isak who is, actually made a real impact when coming off the bench on Saturday. He's got an XG per 90 of his 5 starts this season of 0.73. The only player in the Premier League who started 5 games who's got a higher XG per 90 than Alexander Isak is, does anyone know?
Well, imagine Haaland, probably.
No, Haaland.
Erling Haaland. Yeah, Erling Haaland. So you've got someone with those sort of statistics and you're struggling to score goals, which Newcastle really are right now. Surely your first decision is to play him from the beginning, right?
Yeah, unless Eddie Howe is thinking that maybe Man City away isn't the best game to do that. I think probably, next weekend you will see that change because you say Callum is maybe struggling with a little bit of confidence at the moment. The chance that did come his way, the one that he didn't really meet with conviction, I think a fully firing Callum Wilson certainly gets a decent strike on that and probably scores. So, yeah, it is the obvious change. It's unusual, isn't it, for a manager to leave a record signing in reserve when, the guy who's currently leading the line up front isn't scoring goals.
And Phil Foden, unbelievable form right now. He is playing probably some of his best football. He seems to be free of that injury which troubled him in the first half of the season. The way he wriggled through that Newcastle defence for the first goal was pretty impressive, wasn't it, Kev?
It's a very Phil Foden type of goal. He had such close control, such ability, such instinct in those situations. That was really interesting what Pep Guardiola said about him. The fact that he had a lot at a very young age, and it's only natural, having hit the heights, to just take a little step back and have that dip. They have the squads to be able to accommodate that. So when he wasn't playing particularly well, you could take him out the team, you could put others in. Their squad is still frightening. And the fact that they were happy to let Raheem Sterling go, Zinchenko go, Gabriel Jesus go, and yet they still have the quality of options they have up front, is really quite frightening for the rest of the league. However, still don't think it's the City that we've come to know over the last few years. I think it is in patches. I don't think they're controlling games in the same way as they often do. And so I still think they've got a gear or two to go up. And I just wonder whether Arsenal will bring that out of them. I suspect they probably will.
In terms of Manchester City as well, Cook's once again is somebody else who had to just take a little step back. Not a giant step back, but a little step back, doing so well. Suffer a bit of a defeat, then start again, a little bit of a low time, then come back. Everything will be okay again. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Stop crying. Phil Foden playing particularly well, but Kevin De Bruyne having a bit of a setback. He was substituted in that game, and he didn't like it, Pep, when I asked him afterwards whether or not Kevin De Bruyne was happy about being substituted.
He's not been the same player since the World Cup, and I wonder if, Belgium's early elimination has played a part in that, or whether, De Bruyne is just jaded from the fact that he's played so many games for club and country over the past couple of years. But he's a big part of the reason that, as Kev has said, that Manchester City aren't quite firing on all cylinders. Their 2 best players for me since the World Cup have been Phil Foden and Jack Grealish, which bodes very well for Gareth Southgate. I
think one of their best players has been Nathan Ake, actually, who's been absolutely terrific at the heart of defence all season, bearing in mind the number of chops and changes that have gone alongside him. He's really come to the fore this season for Pep Guardiola. He looks much more muscular, leaner, stronger, faster, quicker, sharper in the tackle, reads the game brilliantly, distributes the ball well. I think he's been absolutely superb over the last few months. And he's really taken confidence from the World Cup, really taken confidence from his second season at a big club in Manchester City as well. And it's another one that actually begs the question. Again, when you look at it, Chelsea had Salah, De Bruyne, Ake. Crikey, how many players have they let go? You talk about the recruitment, but the retention at Chelsea has been terribly poor as well. Certainly the development of players, and that's a key thing, isn't it? And maybe when we move on to Chelsea, we'll talk about the fact that actually that's one of the things that Graham Potter can do, is try and improve players over time. Maybe that hasn't happened with some of the other coaches that they have had there.
He also smells incredibly, Nathan Ake. He's the nicest smelling footballer. When he comes through the mix zone, I don't know what aftershave he wears, but honestly,
you should ask him.
You should ask him, because you smell terrible a lot of the time. Yeah, they stamped the joint out West Ham United on Saturday afternoon. A 4-0 win last week, a 4-0 defeat this week. Ian Abrahams was there for us, and he was saying they were absolutely pathetic. Just have a quick word on what you said about David Moyes on Twitter this week. You were suggesting that there is still full confidence in him. Is that true, or is it the fact that actually they're so desperate to stay in the Premier League because David Sullivan's going to sell the club in the summer, and as a result of that, they don't want too much disruption?
Yeah, maybe there's some semblance of truth. Listen, I think that they've done their due diligence. They've certainly looked around and assessed the managerial market, but there's no standout candidate to replace David Moyes, which I think is a big part of the reason the board at the moment are staying loyal to him. I've said it before, if you're West Ham, you're 16th in the table, you're a point above the relegation places with 13 games to go, and David Moyes isn't your manager, then who do you parachute in to try and save you from relegation? You parachute in David Moyes. They're away
not the
form.
only manager that can save teams from relegation, is he? I mean, that's there are other options out there, aren't there? There must be.
Yeah, but who? You look at Leeds and Southampton, the mess they got in with their managerial searches. I know Rafa Benitez would take the job. Interested to see how West Ham fans would feel about that. But apart from
he's
him,
not really doing the rounds at the moment. Has anyone seen him on a TV screen? Because
he gave I loved him, but he gave the longest answers ever at the weekend. They were asking him stuff, and it was like 3-4 minutes at a time. It's nearly as bad as me.
Excuse me, we've got a commercial break here.
I was thinking that. I was thinking of the producers going wild at his answers, but they were fascinating, all of them. I love listening to him talk about football. But I find it's interesting you say that about, I wonder what the fans would think about that. There's such negativity attached to him. I think he's an amazing coach with an incredible CV, very fondly thought of in one part of Liverpool and in Newcastle. But there is this antipathy towards him. It's very strange.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Chelsea fans have had a problem with him, especially when he came. But I must admit, the job he did at Chelsea was absolutely remarkable. And not only that, he's just such a polite, nice guy. I mean, obviously, look, he's a massive political animal and he knows how to play the game. So let's not pretend that he's not doing things behind the scenes, Rafa Benitez. But he's so polite. He is. And I'm sure if a producer did say to him, could you quicken up your answers, please, Rafa? He'd apologise profusely about going on far too long. Declan Rice was interesting when he spoke to the TV cameras after the game. He's clearly been affected by some of the criticism labelled at him. Rookie criticised him in midweek. And actually, everyone was going on about the fact that he could be up for a £100 million move to Arsenal. And Roy sort of dampened down that expectation and said, you're not entirely sure that he's as good as everybody's making out. Do you think that Declan has been affected by that?
Certainly, when you look at his answer, but although it didn't really hold water, did it? He said, if these people were all that, they'd be playing the game. Roy Keane played to a fairly decent level, Declan, and has the medals to prove it. I've been a big fan of Declan Rice in the past. I've been advocating him as a solution to Manchester United's midfield problem for some time. I'm not a big fan of the Declan Rice that we've seen this season. He looks miles away from being a £100 million player. He isn't that driving force that he has been. And I think that's been a big issue for West Ham. I think he was done by Moises Caicedo at the weekend, and good news for Brighton that he's signed a new contract. And I think if you're looking at a £100 million player, you'd say that Caicedo is nearer that ballpark than Declan Rice on current form.
Interesting to see what happens with him over the course of the summer. I think the general consensus is that he's going to end up moving to Arsenal, but we shall see. Another strong performance from Brighton. Matoma is having a great season, Kevin.
He's wonderful. I mean, it's not just the dribbling, it's not just the one-on-one ability, it's the movement as well. He always knows exactly where to be, picks up the pieces in the box, scores goals, makes goals, affects the game. That's what you're always looking for, a player that doesn't go missing, is always trying to affect the game. And I just think them in general, they have such a sure-footed approach. They know exactly what the manager wants, they know exactly what the plan is, and they carry it out. And I think now when teams face Brighton, they are genuinely a bit scrambled. I mean, you look at some of the goals they score and it's players not marking, players not tracking. I don't think that's because players don't want to. I think there are so many things that Brighton do in game, and it's actually quite a lot mentally for opposition players to deal with. I think De Zerbi has taken what Potter did, and I think I don't subscribe to this idea that, Potter obviously wasn't doing that great because De Zerbi's come in and they're even better. No, none of this happens if Potter hasn't already moulded a group that can take on that tactical information and all of those nuances. So I think Potter deserves credit. De Zerbi deserves credit. It's just a great story.
How much credit is he getting, though, and how much are other football clubs looking very closely at his abilities, Crook? Because there's lots of rumours this week that there are Premier League clubs who are eyeing up his services and that of Steve Cooper in the summer.
Yeah, I'm not as convinced by the Steve Cooper one, to be honest. That, to me, has the hallmarks of a busy agent. Not that I'm, deriding what Steve Cooper's done at Forest, but I think he's still got
I don't think
some
that's the
way to
case
go.
at all, because Steve Cooper, if you saw Steve Cooper's reaction to those rumours, the way he sort of dealt with them was to sort of reiterate his commitment 100% to Nottingham Forest and just bat them away and say that's absolute nonsense. Not even any of the sort of, I'm flattered, it's nice to hear. He completely batted it away, went, absolutely not, I'm staying here, this is my club.
Fair play to him for doing that. But on De Zerbi, I think there will be interest from bigger clubs in the Premier League. Certainly there's interest from clubs in Italy, whereas Kev will know his reputation is very high. You have to remember, this is a guy who sees himself as a Champions League manager. That's why he went to Shakhtar, obviously had to leave there for reasons beyond his control. And I think he sees Brighton as a team who are in the fight for fourth place. They're not really being talked about because at the moment they're eighth in the table, and you're thinking, well, there's too many teams ahead of them. They've got 3 games in hand over Spurs. If they win those 3 games in hand, they'll be in fourth. And, the way they're playing, particularly at home, it's going to take some team to stop them. So I think they've got an outside chance, bearing in mind that Newcastle are falling away. Obviously, Liverpool seem to have found a bit of form, which could be a problem. You're not convinced by Spurs. I think Brighton are better than Fulham, who are above them at the moment. So at the very worst, they're going to be in Europe next season. That might just help keep De Zerbi, but it's a challenge. They've protected themselves, Brighton, because he's got a release clause of more than £10 million. That's quite clever from Tony Bloom.
Yeah, I just want to see if there's any more of those straws on the floor there that the South Coast correspondent can clutch at as he tries to ensure that one of his clubs stays relevant next campaign after the other two are going to disappear down the plug hole. The idea that they've got 3 games in hand and they're going to win them all, bearing in mind the other week they lost at Fulham when they were probably the better team in the game. They're inconsistent at best sometimes. Sort of smacks me as a little bit optimistic. But then again, Spurs aren't exactly doing particularly well, are they? They were absolutely miserable in their game against Wolverhampton Wanderers, 1-0 to Wolves. I mean, first of all, Wolves scored a goal. Well done. Second of all, Spurs dumped out of the FA Cup in midweek. Lose to Wolves at the weekend. What on earth are they doing, Kev?
It's a strange one. Look, that game against Wolves, a couple of efforts that hit the frame of the goal. If they go in, maybe it's a completely different game. But what I find strange about them is that they don't really dominate enough games. You look at the quality that they've got. Everything's fine margins. And if you do it like that, and if you keep every game tight, games that go against you that shouldn't, that's going to happen to you. And that's what happened, I think, at the weekend. It wasn't as if Wolves...
Yes, so they have this philosophy, Kev, where they don't want anything to happen in a football match.
Yeah. And it's about control. And it's about almost wearing the opposition down to push late on. But the problem they've got is that they don't seem to have that final push a lot of the time. Look, they're in the mix for Champions League. They're still in the Champions League. Somehow. But I thought the FA Cup selection was balmy, quite frankly, because it's not as if Spurs get many chances to go deep in cups. Their record would tell you that. And so that was an opportunity to play your best team, to get through to the next stage, to get through to the quarterfinals, build a bit of momentum.
With half the Premier League teams out.
Yeah, build some momentum. And I just don't understand that at all. So I think that was a mistake. There's a hell of a lot riding on that clash with Milan, which I'm going to be at for talkSPORT, actually. And I think there is a hell of a lot riding on that, because if they go out of that, and then it's just about whether they make top 4, I think all of this talk about Antonio Conte's future is just going to get louder and louder. And I look at that squad, and it just isn't being maximised. That's the truth of it.
Well, it isn't being maximised, because there's a question for you. Why on earth did they bother signing Richarlison? What was the point of signing Richarlison? A guy who scores goals for Brazil, leads the line for Brazil, can't get a game for Tottenham Hotspur, scored 2 goals for them. That was in the Champions League in a game against Marseille earlier in the season. Hasn't scored before or since. Why? Why bring on the likes of Lucas Moura and Emerson ahead of him? Why do that?
It's all a bit of a hodgepodge, isn't it, at the moment? Excuse the pun, Pochettino, keen to come back.
Where's the pun?
And obviously, there's this faith in Son, I think, based on what he's done in previous seasons. But he's had a really poor campaign. He looks to me like a player who's crying out for a rest. And, Richarlison would be the obvious replacement. More baffling was the team selection in midweek. This is Tottenham who never win anything. The FA Cup draw has opened up because a lot of the big clubs have been knocked out. To leave out Harry Kane away from home against Sheffield United, I'm baffled by that. Absolutely baffled by that. And they're just a club going nowhere. Listen, Manchester United had a shocking weekend. They let in 7. We haven't mentioned that really. Tottenham have had an even worse week. That takes them doing it. Imagine being a Tottenham fan. That must be absolutely soul-destroying season after season.
What was that Manchester United score?
I can't remember.
I forgot. Sorry, you should have reminded me. Everyone's up to 13th. They're probably not safe yet, but then again, no one in the bottom half of the table is safe, I think, because it is so congested down there. It's so tight, isn't it? That bottom 7 or 8 teams are so very stuck together, aren't they? I think it's it's got the makings of a brilliant end to the season if you're a neutral observer watching that relegation fight. You've got Bournemouth on 21 points from 25 games, and then Crystal Palace in 12th. We're only 6 points above them on the same number of games. That's absolutely ridiculous, isn't it?
They've not won a game in 2023. Their next 3 fixtures look really difficult. I can't see where the next win is coming from. I can't see who's going to score the goals.
What are their fixtures? Tell me.
Well, they've got Manchester City. I think that game is live on talkSPORT. Is it on Saturday? Then they've got Brighton. And then I think they've got Arsenal after that, or certainly another one of the big guns that you would expect them not to beat. So where's the next win coming from? Where's the next goal coming from? And if you're one of those teams who are trying to build up a bit of momentum and get yourselves out of trouble, I think you look to Crystal Palace as one that you can really drag in. I've never been convinced by Patrick Vieira. You know that. And, I think he should be coming under a lot more scrutiny than he is, bearing in mind the type of run they're on.
One man who's definitely coming under a lot more scrutiny is the Leicester manager, Brendan Rodgers. They could be the ones that fall from the pack. A huge win for Saints of the weekend. Impressive response to their embarrassing cup exit to Grimsby. But they were playing against a Leicester team who were absolutely awful. The selection was a bit strange, but also the manner in which that they operate. And one of the things I sort of worried about with Leicester, and it's the same thing that worried me about West Ham, is when the manager starts talking about, I can take responsibility as much as you like, but players need to start taking responsibility. You're in 2 situations there. You're either confident in the authority that you've got as the manager of the football club, or you are now in the last chance saloon. And maybe David Moyes and Brendan Rodgers are both in that last chance saloon, because Brendan Rodgers in particular has got a second chance here. There was every opportunity and every expectation that he was going to get fired in the first half of the season, Kev. But he managed to turn it round, came up with a good result, stay of execution. But all of a sudden now, the spotlight definitely is befalling him.
Yeah, I said a few weeks ago I thought they might get dragged into it a bit deeper. And then they went on this decent run. But I do think there's a disconnect. He talks sometimes as if he's nothing to do with it. So it's a very strange, he'll kind of talk about the game as if he had no influence on it whatsoever. They've got really good players. But in his defence, he can't put in those chances that Iheanacho has. He can't head home from 6 yards. But he had a spell, Iheanacho, where he was playing really well, scoring goals, influencing the game. But this is why, with the greatest respect to Leicester, and I have a huge amount of respect for Leicester for what they've done in the last few years. It's really quite remarkable what they've achieved. But that's why he's at Leicester and why he's not a Champions League club. Because
that's why he was sold by Manchester City.
Yeah, he has spells where he's brilliant.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, but 27, I think. Yeah.
He has spells where he's brilliant, and he has spells where he has a head like a 50p piece. It's really strange. So, look, that's the separation between good players and elite players, that consistency over time. I think Rodgers is a victim of his own success. He won an FA Cup. They finished 5th, 2 seasons running. People are expecting that to be maintained. It was never, ever going to be maintained. I don't think he's had a free hand in terms of recruitment necessarily, in terms of what he would have wanted to add to the squad. But he's got to find a way of getting some momentum, or they might slip out the league.
Yeah, they're in serious trouble, and they have lost that sort of stinginess that they had just prior to the World Cup. Well, they didn't want the World Cup to come because they were playing so well. Ruben Selles, the interim manager, stroke permanent manager, I'm not entirely sure what his position is now at this moment in time, of Southampton, has managed to pick up 2 Premier League wins and 2 clean sheets in 3 games, which is more than Nathan Jones managed in his entire reign as the Southampton manager. So well done to him. Interesting management of Romeo Lavia as well, who was brilliant in the game after being criticised by Sellers in a press conference earlier in the week.
Yeah, I think criticise is probably too strong a word. I think he was just trying to keep a young player's feet on the ground. There's been a lot of noise around Romeo Lavia. Again, I think a lot of it generated by agents. Listen, Chelsea, we know, did make a bid.
What did he say about him? He said, I haven't seen it. He said, everyone talks to me about this wonderful telly. I haven't seen it.
He said he's got a long way to go. I think he can be a great player. He's not there yet. So, I think you have to look at the entire answer rather than just a small snippet. I don't think it was him having a pop at Lavia. I think, as I say, he was just trying to calm down some of the noise. And it worked because Lavia was very impressive. I think he is a very good player. I think they're going to do well to keep hold of him in the summer. I know Chelsea are massive fans. He's been linked with the likes of Manchester United as well. But, I mean, you mentioned Ruben Selles there picking up more wins than Nathan Jones. I worked it out. Since mid-October going into this weekend, Southampton had more managers than they'd had Premier League victories. If they go down, it's solely on the people who hired Nathan Jones. That was where their season unravelled. They've got it all to do now because they've got a difficult run of fixtures, but there was a bit of organisation there at least at the weekend. It was a good response, as you say, to Grimsby. I'm going to pick out Theo Walcott, and don't say it's because he's your mate. Second Premier League start of the season. He was excellent. He was a leader. He cares about the football club. We spoke to him afterwards. He spoke really well about some home truths that have been said after Grimsby, about the fact that there are more people who care about this football club than maybe you realise. And I think he's got a massive part to play if Southampton are to stay up.
Okay, a quick word on you working out how many managers Southampton had since October. Was it difficult for you to count to 3?
I had to get a calculator out.
Did you? Could you get up to 7 for us?
Ooh, there he goes. I knew that was coming, honestly.
Chelsea 1, Leeds United 0. What a dire game this was. Crikey. Two sides that just cannot score goals, separated by a set piece from Wesley Fofana. I'm sure a little bit of pressure comes off Graham Potter's shoulders this week, but they've got big games to come. They've got Dortmund in midweek, and if they don't win that, then their season is over, Kevin. And they should be concerned about that game, shouldn't they?
Yeah, they should. I commentated on Dortmund on Friday night. They weren't perfect against Leipzig, but they got the job done. And what is very encouraging from a Dortmund point of view is how they defended towards the end. Leipzig outplayed them for big spells of that game. And yet Nico Schlotterbeck was positively Herculean at the heart of that defence. Brilliant goal line block from Timo Werner at the end. A goal-saving challenge against Christopher Nkunku. They hope that the goalkeeper will be back. Gregor Kobel missed out at the weekend, so that would be a big concern if he was out. But in general, they've won all 10 of their games in 2023 in League and Cup, and they've won close ones. And all the things you would normally level against Dortmund, they're bad at set-piece defending, they're a bit flaky, they lose tight games, none of that's been true. In 2023, Jude Bellingham's getting through mountains of work in that midfield area, lots of selfless work that wouldn't necessarily get noticed. I think this is a real test for Chelsea, I really do.
Yeah, Mudryk, a new sub again this week. Aside from his cameo at Anfield, it hasn't really been a fruitful move so far. This is a long-term project, not a short-term project. We will see more of him as time goes on, but he promised so much in that half an hour against Liverpool that I think Chelsea fans were quite excited about seeing a lot more of him over the course of this season. He just hasn't kicked on from there. He hasn't even rekindled any of that since being used by Graham Potter. As for Leeds, no Bamford, Ruter leading the line, and they struggled despite maybe the odd chance here and there. Desperate for Rodrigo to get back from injury, but I'm not entirely sure that's going to happen in time for them to get enough points on the board. They're down there as well. scrapping with the likes of Leicester, scrapping with the likes of Everton, scrapping with the likes of West Ham United. Aston Villa probably safe with 34 points, but they are safe with 34 points. You need only 34 points to stay in the league. History will tell us that. Against Palace, they beat them by a goal to nil. Back-to-back wins for them after 3 defeats in a row. Palace yet to win this calendar year, 9 games without a win. Relegation form without doubt. We've already mentioned the problems that Patrick Vieira has had behind the scenes. He lost Sean Derry the other week. There seems to be a bit of friction behind the scenes there at Crystal Palace, and there could well be an issue as a result. Brentford Fulham is live on talkSPORT Monday night. Chelsea Dortmund live on talkSPORT Tuesday night. Wednesday night, Bayern Munich against Paris Saint-Germain, and Thursday, Sporting against Arsenal. I'm heading off to Tottenham against Milan. Kev, you're doing that one as well, aren't you?
Yes, I'm looking forward to that one very much. I think that's going to be...
Big game.
Yeah, and a Milan team that's looked a bit better in recent games, so that is a really stiff test for Tottenham. But could be, the night that ignites their campaign again. So really, really looking forward to that.
Yeah, and I'll be going to Old Trafford on Thursday night for the night that Erik Ten Hag hopes reinvigorates their campaign. Crook, will you be going to Old Trafford to cheer on your boys, to get behind them after such a dismal result? Bearing in mind, you told me you wouldn't go to the Barcelona game because you thought they might lose. That's how fair weather you are.
Not this week. No. I will be. I'll be watching that one from the comfort of the television. It's going to be -2, so I'll be wrapped up nice and warm.
Enjoy yourself. Thank you very much. We'll be back later to preview all the weekend's footballing action. Remember, you can access it via the talkSPORT app, where you can flick through all the commentaries that are happening this week as you go between talkSPORT and talkSPORT 2.